The argument was already burning when Marisol Vance stepped onto the upper landing of Heartstone Hall. She had been told to remain in the lower gallery until she was sent for. The under-butler had said so twice. The housekeeper had said so once, with a long look that suggested she said it to everyone the same way. But the voices on the floor above were carrying through the carved oak banisters with such unkind clarity that Marisol could not pretend she did not hear them, and she had never been the kind of woman who could stand quietly while strangers decided what would become of her. "Another stray, Mother. How many do you intend to gather before the year is out?" The man's voice was low, polished, and edged like a blade newly cleaned. Marisol did not need to see him to know he was a man accustomed to silences answering him. "She is not a stray, Garrick. She is a woman, and she is qualified." That voice was the dowager's, Lady Imogen Heartstone. The same voice that 4 days ago had crossed a muddy lane in the village of Briar Caldwell and asked Marisol gently whether she had eaten that day. Marisol had not. She had been counting, for the third time, the 11 shillings sewn into the hem of her traveling cloak. Lady Imogen had said, "Walk with me," and Marisol had walked. 3 days ago she had been sleeping in the loft, above a coaching inn's tack room. 2 days ago she had been offered a position, a roof, a door that locked from the inside. Yesterday she had cried into a basin of clean water for the first time in nearly a year, because the soap had smelled of lavender, and someone had simply handed it to her, without asking what she had done to deserve it. Today she was being discussed on the upper floor of a strange great house, as though she were a draft someone had failed to close out. "Qualified by whom?" the man said. "By her own report?" She walked into Briar Caldwell with a single trunk and no letters, no references, no prior household, no family connection in any directory I have consulted, and I have consulted them all. "You have consulted them all in 3 days. I have a great many things at my disposal, Mother. I have used them." Marisol's hand tightened on the banister. The wood was cold. Somewhere far below, a clock struck the half-hour, and a footman in the lower gallery cleared his throat as though to remind her that she was still meant to be standing under a portrait of someone's grandmother, and not creeping toward an argument that did not concern her. It did concern her. It concerned her a great deal. "Garrick," Lady Imogen said, and her voice was perfectly even. "Hattie has not spoken in 5 months. I am aware. She has not spoken to her tutor. She has not spoken to her nurse. She has not spoken to me, and I am her grandmother. She speaks to no one. I am aware. Then perhaps you might allow that someone new, someone the child has not already learned to fear or pity, might be of use, or might be of harm, to a 6-year-old, in a household with 22 staff and a master who locks his study at night. To my ward," he said, and the word landed harder than the rest. "To my brother's daughter, to the only piece of him I still have above ground. Yes, Mother. To harm. Because every person who has come through that gate since the funeral has wanted something, and the longer I sit in this house pretending otherwise, the more certain I am that the next one will simply be cleverer than the last." Marisol stopped breathing. She had known, vaguely, that there was a child. She had been told by Lady Imogen, in the carriage, that the household contained a young ward in need of gentle company. She had pictured, foolishly, a pale girl in a clean dress sitting at a window seat with a book she could not yet read. She had not pictured a child who had not spoken in 5 months. She had not pictured a man who guarded that child the way a soldier guards the last fire on a cold field. "You will frighten her," Lady Imogen said softly. "I would rather frighten her than bury her." The door at the top of the landing was ajar. Marisol could see the corner of a desk, and the edge of a green carpet, and the back of a tall coat, very well cut, very still. She should have gone back down. She knew she should have gone back down. Instead, she crossed the landing, set her hand against the door, and pushed it the rest of the way open. Two heads turned. Lady Imogen's eyebrows lifted, but not unkindly. The man's face she saw clearly for the first time. He was younger than she had imagined, perhaps 32, with dark hair cut close and a jaw that looked as though it had forgotten how to ease. His eyes were a gray so dark it crossed into something almost black, and they fixed on her with the still attention of a man cataloging a stranger in a room he owned. "You were told to wait downstairs," Lady Imogen said. Not a reprimand, a statement, given for the benefit of the third person in the room. "I know," Marisol said. And yet I would rather not be discussed in a corridor I am standing under." Marisol's voice came out steadier than she had any right to expect. "If His Grace has objections to my presence, I would rather hear them from his own mouth than guess at them through a banister." The Duke of Ravenmere did not move. He did not speak for a long moment. The clock somewhere below struck again. "Get out," he said. "Garrick." "No, Mother." He had not raised his voice. He had not needed to. "If Miss Vance wishes to enter rooms uninvited, she can begin her acquaintance with this house by leaving them when she is told. The door, Miss Vance. Now." Marisol did not move. Her heart was striking her ribs hard enough that she was certain he could hear it. But she had spent the better part of 3 years in a house where flinching had been treated as encouragement, and she had trained the habit out of herself. "Your Grace," she said, "I came through that gate because your mother offered me a chance to be useful. I did not come because I wanted a great house, or a duke, or a name on a register. I came because I had nowhere else to go, and she was the first person in a year who looked at me as though I were a person and not a problem. If you intend to send me away, I will go. But I will not be sent away on the strength of a conversation I was not permitted to attend." There was a silence so complete she could hear the fire behind him hiss against a damp log. "Did you," he said slowly, "just refuse a direct instruction in my own study?" "I heard your instruction. I asked to finish first." He looked at her. He did not look away. She did not look away either, although it cost her more than she would have admitted aloud, because his gaze had the quality of a man weighing something against a scale only he could see. Then, deliberately, he walked to the door. He did not slam it. He held it open. "Downstairs," he said. "Now. If you are still in this house in 1 hour, we will discuss the terms under which you remain. You will not enter a room I am in without permission again, Miss Vance. One misstep. Do I make myself understood?" It wasn't a question. "Perfectly, Your Grace," she said. She walked past him with her chin level, and she did not let herself shake until she had reached the lower gallery and the footman had carefully looked at the floor. When Lady Imogen came down at last, her face was schooled into something Marisol could not read. "He has agreed," she said simply. "You will serve as interim companion to Lady Hattie until a permanent governess is engaged. Mrs. Penhale will show you to your room and your duties. You will report to me on the child. You will not seek my son out, and you will not avoid him so visibly that the household begins to talk. Yes. You challenged him on your first hour, Marisol. Garrick does not forget challenges. He files them. I did not mean to be disrespectful." "I know," Lady Imogen said, and a tired smile crossed her mouth. "But you were anyway. That is going to make this complicated." The room she was given was small, clean, and infinitely more than she had hoped for. A narrow bed, a washstand, a door that locked from the inside. Marisol sat down on the bed and let herself breathe for the first time since the carriage. She had defied a duke on her first day in his house. She had no idea what he would ask of her next, and she had not yet laid eyes on the child she had been brought here to comfort. But she knew, with a cold, steady certainty, that settled somewhere behind her ribs and stayed there, that nothing under this roof was going to be simple. Mrs. Penhale knocked at 5:30 in the morning, and she did not knock twice. 30 minutes to wash and present yourself, Miss Vance. Staff take their breakfast at 6. You will be observed before you observe. Marisol was downstairs in 24 minutes, hair pinned, hands clean, the borrowed gray dress from Lady Imogen's woman pulling slightly across the shoulders. The servants' hall fell quiet when she entered. 20 pairs of eyes assessed her in the practiced second a household gives a stranger, and 20 pairs of eyes returned, with admirable smoothness, to their bread and butter. Mr. Caddick, the butler, did not look at her at all. He was a tall, narrow man, with the bearing of someone who had served the previous duke and disapproved of every change since. The cook nodded once, briskly. A young housemaid with red hair under her cap stared a fraction of a second too long, and then did not stare again. By 8, Marisol had been walked through the morning rooms, the linen cupboards, the menu books, and the supplier ledgers. "You will assist me with household correspondence," Mrs. Penhale said. "Until her ladyship determines, you are useful for more. Your principal charge is Lady Hattie. She takes her breakfast at 7 in the schoolroom. She has not eaten with company in 5 months. You will not address her unless she addresses you. You will not touch her. You will not speak of her mother. Are we clear, Miss Vance?" "Perfectly clear." "Good. The schoolroom is on the 2nd floor, west wing. The nurse, Mrs. Orry, will be present. You will sit, you will be quiet, and you will not be charming. Charming is what this child has been refusing for 5 months. We are past charming." The schoolroom was a long, sun-warm room with 3 tall windows and a fire that had been laid, but not lit. A low table held a porringer of milk and a small dish of stewed apple, untouched, a book of verses untouched, a worn cloth rabbit with one ear half unstitched, held tightly in the lap of the smallest person Marisol had ever seen sit so still. Hattie Hartstone was 6 years old. Her hair was the dark brown of wet earth, plaited back from a face that had clearly once been quick and was now careful in a way no child's face should be. She wore a dove-gray dress with a small black ribbon at the collar. Half mourning. 5 months in. Marisol sat down on the chair by the window, where Mrs. Orry had pointed without speaking. She did not greet the child. She did not smile. She took a small darning basket from the side table and began to mend a stocking she had been given for the purpose. Hattie did not look up. Her thumb worked at the loose thread of the rabbit's ear, gently, over and over. Marisol did not say a word for 40 minutes. At 8 o'clock, Mrs. Orry rose, said something quiet about the kitchen, and went out, leaving the door precisely 2 inches ajar. Marisol understood, because she had been a girl in a house where doors were left ajar for the same reason. Mrs. Orry did not yet trust her, but Mrs. Orry was prepared to test her. She heard, after perhaps 3 minutes, the soft scrape of the small chair. She did not look up. A small foot in a black slipper came into the edge of her vision, then a second foot, then a hand, smaller than her own had been at that age, set the cloth rabbit on the corner of the side table near Marisol's elbow, with the half-unstitched ear turned uppermost. Marisol kept her eyes on the stocking. She let 3 breaths pass. Then, without lifting her gaze, she set the stocking aside, picked up the rabbit, threaded a fresh length of gray thread, and mended the ear. 6 small stitches, a tiny knot. She bit the thread, smoothed the seam with her thumb, and set the rabbit back exactly where it had been placed. She picked up the stocking again. For a long moment nothing happened. Then the small hand reached out, took the rabbit, and drew it back into the small lap, and the small thumb moved over the new stitches, again and again, the way a person checks a thing they cannot quite believe is whole. Marisol's throat closed so hard she could not have spoken if she had been ordered to. The child said nothing, did not raise her face, but she did not move away either. When Mrs. Orry came back, the rabbit had been returned to the child's lap, and nothing had visibly changed in the room. Mrs. Orry's eyes flicked once to the rabbit, once to Marisol's face. Mrs. Orry did not speak, but when Marisol rose at noon to take her own dinner, Mrs. Orry held the door for her, which she had not done that morning. Lady Imogen was waiting in the small library after dinner. "Tell me," she said. She set the rabbit beside me. The ear was torn. I mended it. I did not speak. She took it back. Lady Imogen sat still for a moment. Then she put her hand briefly over her mouth and lowered it again, and said, in a voice that was not quite even, "She has not handed anything to anyone since her mother died." Marisol said nothing, because there was nothing safe to say. "Her mother was my younger son's wife," Lady Imogen said quietly. "Lillian. A summer fever. Quick. My son followed her 4 weeks later, on the road to London, in a carriage accident that should not have killed a man his age, and did. Hattie was in the house when news came of both. She was 5.5. She is 6 now, and she has not said a word since the night they buried her father. Garrick is her guardian. He is also a man who has buried 2 people in 1 season and has not yet remembered how to set down the spade." Marisol thought of the man at the door of the study, and she understood, for the first time, the particular flavor of his anger. "There is something you should know, Marisol." Lady Imogen's eyes were steady. "There is a matter concerning Hattie's mother that has not been settled. A matter from before her marriage. It is not yet the time to speak of it, but it will become the time. Do you understand?" "No, my lady." "Good," Lady Imogen said. "Honest. That will do for now." For 3 days, Marisol did not see the Duke at all. She rose at 5. She sat in the schoolroom from 7 until 11. She mended what was given to her, read aloud from a book of fables, when Mrs. Orry indicated she might, and sat in silence when Mrs. Orry did not. Hattie set the rabbit on the corner of the side table on the 2nd morning and on the 3rd. On the 2nd morning, the rabbit had a fresh tear along the underside of one foreleg, which Marisol mended without comment. On the 3rd morning, the rabbit's left paw had been carefully torn at the seam. Marisol mended the paw. Hattie carried the rabbit back to her lap and pressed her face for 1 second into its fur. Marisol understood, on the 3rd morning, that she was being given a small daily commission by a child who had not yet decided whether the new woman in the schoolroom was real, and who was testing, by means of the rabbit, whether the new woman would be there again in the morning to mend the next thing. In the afternoons, Marisol worked through the household correspondence. On the 2nd afternoon, she found, in the supplier ledger, that the chandler had been billing for 40 pounds of beeswax candles, a quarter, and delivering 32. On the 3rd afternoon, she found a butter account that had been paid twice. She made a clean column of figures and laid it on Mrs. Penhale's writing desk, with no note attached. The next morning, the column had been returned to her, with 3 small marks in pencil at the margin, and a single line at the bottom in Mrs. Penhale's hand. Continue. On the 4th evening, she was alone in the small office adjoining the library, finishing a letter to a draper, when she heard a footstep in the corridor and knew, before she looked up, who it was. The Duke did not enter. He stopped in the doorway. He was still in his coat from the road, mud on his boots, his cravat loosened by half an inch and no more. "You are still here," he said. "Your mother gave me a position. I intend to fulfill it. Mrs. Penhale tells me you have found 2 errors in the supplier accounts in 3 days. 3 errors. The chandler. The butter. And there is a coal weight I would like to look at again before I commit to it." He did not come in. He did not leave. "My ward," he said, and his voice was lower now, careful in a way she had not yet heard. "Set a cloth rabbit on a table near you on Monday morning." Marisol set her pen down. "Yes, Your Grace. Mrs. Ori reports that Hattie has placed the rabbit in your hands every morning since. She has not placed it in my hands. She has placed it within my reach. There is a difference." He did not answer that for a long second. When she glanced up briefly, the corner of his mouth had done something it had not done in the study 3 nights ago. It was not a smile. It was the place on a face where a smile would have been, if the man's face had remembered how. "A difference," he repeated. "Yes." "Continue your work, Miss Vance," he said after a moment. "If you are still in this house at the end of the week, we will speak about a more permanent arrangement." He did not wait for a reply. She heard his footsteps move on down the corridor, and then she heard them stop, somewhere out of sight, for the length of 3 breaths, before they continued. He had paused. She did not let herself imagine why. She picked up her pen. Her hand was steady. The rest of her was not. The letter came on a Tuesday, with the second post, in a hand Marisol had hoped never to see again. She was in the small office, finishing the week's tally, when Mr. Caddick entered without knocking. That alone was unusual. "For you, Miss Vance," he said. "Brought by a private writer. The writer is gone." He did not wait. He set the letter on the desk and withdrew. He did not look at her face. Marisol was grateful for it, because her face had stopped pretending the moment she had seen the address. The hand was square, hard-pressed, slightly slanted to the right. She had watched that hand sign her mother's marriage register when she was 11 years old, and she had once, when she was 16, watched it strike her grandmother across the mouth for asking after the rent. She did not open the letter in the office. She carried it upstairs, locked her door, and broke the seal slowly, because she had promised herself on the night she left Carrowfield that she would never again do anything in that man's name with a shaking hand. "Marisol, I know where you are. I know whose roof you are under. I know the name of the child you are paid to sit beside, and I know the name of the man who pays you. The country is not as wide as you imagined when you took my purse from the desk drawer and ran for a coat you had not earned the price of. I am owed restitution, and I will have it. You will return to Carrowfield within 7 days of receiving this letter, or I will write to the Duke of Ravenmere directly, and I will explain to him, with such particulars as I see fit to provide, the nature of the woman he has placed in a room with his late brother's daughter. 7 days, Marisol. Come home before I send for you." Silas Brennick. She read it twice. Her hand was not shaking. She was, in fact, very still and very cold. And the cold had the quality of water going under ice, where the surface looks the same, but the thing beneath it has stopped. He had named Hattie. He had named the child. She folded the letter, put it in her pocket, and went down to the schoolroom, because it was 4 o'clock, and Hattie liked the window seat at 4 o'clock when the light came in, long across the floor, and Hattie had begun, in the last 3 days, to lay her head against Marisol's arm for a quarter of an hour at a time. Marisol was not going to take that quarter of an hour from the child today of all days. When Mrs. Ori came in at 5, Hattie had fallen asleep with the cloth rabbit beneath her chin, and one small hand in a fold of Marisol's skirt. Marisol carried the letter to Lady Imogen at 6:30. Lady Imogen read it once. She set it on the table between them. "This is your stepfather. My mother's second husband, yes. Carrowfield is what is left of my mother's family land, in his name since the marriage. And the purse you took, 48 pounds, and a silver ring that had been my grandmother's. The ring I have. The money is gone. I lived on it for 9 weeks before your ladyship found me. He is named Hattie. Yes, my lady. Then we tell Garrick. My lady, please. If he learns of this from anyone but me, he will believe I meant to hide it. You will not hide it. You will be in the room. I will tell him with you present." The Duke was in the long study at 7:30. He looked up when his mother entered, and he saw Marisol behind her, and he set the pen down carefully, the way a man sets down a thing that might shatter if he were not careful with it. Lady Imogen laid the letter on the desk, turned so her son could read it. He did not pick it up. He read it without touching it, as though touching it would put something on his hands. He read it a second time. He did not look at Marisol. "How long," he said, "have you known this man would find you?" "I did not know that he would. I knew that he might." "And you said nothing." "Your Grace, I did not believe." "You did not believe is not an answer in this house, Miss Vance." His voice had not risen. It had gone, instead, to a register so even and so cold that it was worse than shouting. "You did not believe is what people say when they have measured a risk on someone else's account. You sat in my schoolroom for 11 days with my brother's daughter, and you did not believe." "Garrick." "No, Mother. He has named the child. He has named Hattie by name in a letter to a woman who sleeps 2 corridors from her. Do you understand what kind of man writes a name in a letter like that? He's telling us he knows the doors. He's telling us he has measured the house." Marisol's hands were folded in her lap. She made them stay folded. "I understand what kind of man he is, Your Grace. I have lived with what kind of man he is for 7 years. I should have told your mother on the first day that he might pursue me. I told myself I had covered my road well enough. I was wrong, and the cost of my being wrong is sitting 2 corridors away in a dove-gray dress with a black ribbon at the collar. I will leave tonight if you wish it." He looked at her then for the first time. "You will not leave tonight," he said. "Your Grace. You will not leave tonight, Miss Vance, because if you leave tonight, you confirm to that man that he has only to write a letter to move you, and a man who has learnt that he can move you with a letter does not stop at letters." He stood up. "You will stay. Under conditions. You will not go beyond the inner park without an escort. Hattie does not leave the 2nd floor without me, my mother, or Mrs. Orry. Are we understood?" "Yes, Your Grace." "And, Miss Vance," he set both hands flat on the desk and leaned a fraction forward, "one more thing in this house that arrives at my door, without warning. One more piece of your past that you decide on my behalf is too small to mention, and I will not put you out, because I will not give that man the pleasure of having moved you. But I will know, and you will know that I know, that you and I are not what we might have been." She had not, until that sentence, allowed herself to consider what they might have been. "Yes, Your Grace," she said. "Perfectly." He turned to the window and did not turn back. Lady Imogen rose, and Marisol rose, and they left him there with the letter on his desk and the brandy untouched. In the corridor, Lady Imogen put a hand briefly on Marisol's wrist and said, "Lo, he's more frightened than he is angry. Try to remember that." Marisol thought, "So am I," but she did not say it aloud. It was 4 days later that Mrs. Orry slapped a kitchen maid in the 2nd floor corridor, and Marisol learned that fear in this house wore more than one coat. She had come up early, because Hattie had been restless at her dinner. She came up to find Mrs. Orry in the corridor, with her hand still raised, and a girl of perhaps 15 pressed against the wall, with her cap askew and a red mark blooming under her left eye. "What has happened here?" Mrs. Orry turned. She was a square, capable woman of 50, who had been with the previous Duchess for 19 years, and Hattie since Hattie's birth. "This girl," Mrs. Orry said, breathing hard, "took something from the schoolroom." "I did not, ma'am. I swear to you on—" "Be quiet, Pell." "What was taken?" Marisol said. "The miniature. From the mantel. Lady Lillian's miniature. It is gone." Marisol felt the corridor tilt. the small painted oval that sat on the schoolroom mantelpiece, which Hattie did not look at and did not touch, and from which she did not stand more than 4 paces away on the days she sat by the fire. And you saw Pell take it. I saw her in the room. She is a kitchen maid. I came up for the tray, ma'am, only the tray. Be quiet. Mrs. Ori, Marisol said, and her voice was even. Please lower your hand. Mrs. Ori lowered her hand. She had not realized it was still raised. Pell, look at me. Did you take the miniature? No, miss. I did not. I would not put a hand on Lady Lillian's picture, miss. On my mother's life, I would not. Did you go into the schoolroom? To the door, miss. Only to the door. I did not cross the threshold, I swear it. Mrs. Ori, was the miniature on the mantel when you left the room before the tray came up? A pause. Mrs. Ori's mouth opened and closed. I cannot say with certainty. Then before we strike a girl on her face, we will look for it. Miss Vance, you are not. I am not the nurse. No. But I am charged with this floor in your absence by Mrs. Penhale's own schedule. And I am telling you, we will look for it before we accuse a child of 15 of theft from a morning room. She did not raise her voice. She had learned at 16 that quiet was a thing some people heard better than shouting. And Mrs. Ori was, at heart, a fair woman who had been frightened by an empty mantel. Where is his grace? Below stairs, miss, with Mr. Caddick, the wine. Send Liddy for him. We will not move the search forward without him. Marisol took Pell gently by the elbow, walked her 4 steps back from the wall, and put her own handkerchief into the girl's hand. Press this to your face. Do not speak until you are spoken to. You are not in trouble with me. The Duke came up the stairs 2 at a time. He took in the corridor, the kitchen maid with the handkerchief, Mrs. Ori's straightened back, Marisol's folded hands, in a single sweep. What has happened? Marisol told him, plainly, in 30 words. He listened without interrupting, and when she had finished, he said only, We will search the schoolroom, the corridor, and Pell's pocket, in that order. Mrs. Ori, you will be present. Miss Vance, you will be present. Pell, you will turn out your apron yourself in front of all of us when we are ready for you. Is that acceptable, Pell? Yes, Your Grace. The miniature was not on the mantel. It was not on the floor. The Duke himself was the one who found it, finally, in the work basket on the side table by the window seat, half wrapped in a length of gray thread Marisol had been using to mend a pinafore that morning. The basket sat by Hattie's chair. The Duke lifted the miniature out. He did not speak for a moment. Hattie, he said quietly, did you put your mother's picture in the basket? Hattie was sitting in the window seat, the rabbit pressed against her chest, her eyes on the floor, a perfect small statue. She did not speak. She nodded. Once. Why, my love? She did not answer. The Duke did not press her. He set the miniature back on the mantel with a careful hand, and he turned to Pell. Pell, you have been wronged in this corridor tonight. Mrs. Ori will apologize to you in the morning, in front of Mr. Caddick, when she has slept and is herself again. You will accept the apology, and you will continue in your post. And this will not be set against you in any account in this house. Is that acceptable to you? Yes, Your Grace. Then go to your supper. Liddy will walk down with you. When the corridor was empty, the Duke turned to Marisol. They stood 2 paces apart in the half-dark of the gas sconce. That was well done, Miss Vance. It was not done. It was begun. Mrs. Ori will not sleep tonight. No. Nor will I. He paused. Nor, I suspect, will you. No, Your Grace. He looked for a moment, as though he would say something else. He did not. He inclined his head, a fraction, and the kind of bow a man gives an equal in a corridor when there is no one to see him. Give it, and he went down the stairs. Marisol stood with her hand pressed flat against the wall. She had not realized, until that moment, that the wall was the only thing holding her up. 3 nights later, Marisol did not go to bed. At 10:30, she opened a fresh column of figures, and at 11, she opened a second. And at midnight, the small office was the only lit room on the ground floor of the house, except the long study at the far end of the east corridor, where she could see, under his door, the steady line of lamplight that meant the Duke had not gone to bed either. At midnight, she heard his step in the corridor. He stopped in her doorway. He did not come in. He had taken off his coat. He was in his shirt sleeves and waistcoat, his cravat gone entirely, and there was ink on the side of his right hand. "You work late, Miss Vance." "The Chandler's account, Your Grace. I would like to have it ready for Mrs. Penhale in the morning." "Mrs. Penhale would forgive you a morning." "I would not forgive myself one." He almost smiled. She saw it. He looked away before she could be sure. "May I sit?" It was not what she had expected him to say. "Of course, Your Grace." He came in. He took the chair on the other side of the small desk. He sat with his elbows on his knees and his hands loose between them, and for a long moment he did not speak. And Marisol did not speak either, because she had learned at last that there were silences in this house, which were not empty and were not safe to fill. "My brother," he said, could make her laugh in 3 sentences. Lillian. He could be in a foul mood, and the worst kind of weather outside, and he would say 3 things to her over a breakfast tray, and she would laugh until she had to put down her cup. I am not a man who does that. I never was. But I used to sit at that table and watch him, and I used to think, well, he has the gift of it, and I have the rest, and between us, the family is not badly served. She did not say anything. Hattie laughed too in those days. She was a noisy child. She climbed. She fell. She brought worms in from the garden in her pinafore. She put one in my boot once, on purpose, and stood at the door of the morning room and waited for me to find it, because she wanted to see my face. How old was she? 3. 3.5. He let out a breath that was nearly a laugh, and was not. She has not laughed in 5 months, Miss Vance. Not at her grandmother's birthday. Not when the gardener's terrier had poops. Not on Christmas morning. Not laughing is not the same thing as not speaking, and I did not understand that until recently. No, it is not the same. You read to her in the afternoons, from a book about a fox. Yes. She turns the pages for you. Marisol's eyes pricked, sharp and unexpected. On the 3rd afternoon, she did not, the first 2. He looked at her then. He had not looked at her, properly, since he had sat down. "I do not know," he said, "if I can trust you." She did not answer that. There was no answer to it. "I'm beginning to think," he went on, slowly, as though he were placing each word separately on a table where he could still pick them back up, "that whether I can or cannot is not, perhaps, your fault. That is not an apology, Miss Vance. I am not yet able to apologize. But I will say it, because I owe you the honesty of it. You have not behaved like a woman who came here for what she could take. I do not yet know how to be a man who believes that. I am trying. That is more than I have been offered in 3 years, Your Grace." He looked at her a moment longer. Something across the table between them had shifted, by a degree neither of them could name, and both of them, for that instant, knew it. Then, somewhere far down in the house, a bell rang. Once. Sharp. The night bell at the side gate. He was on his feet before she was. "Stay here," he said. "Lock this door." "Your Grace." "Lock it, Miss Vance, until I send word." He was already in the corridor. She sat alone in the lamplit office, with the ink drying on her pen and the column of figures unfinished, and she listened to the night bell ring a second time, and a third, and she did what he had told her to do. She locked the door. The night bell had been rung by a boy of 11 from Briar Caldwell, who had run 2 miles in the dark with a folded paper inside his shirt and arrived at the side gate with 1 shoe missing. He would not give the paper to Mr. Caddick. He had been told to put it into the hand of the Duke and no other. Marisol did not see the boy. She heard, at 20 minutes past 1 in the morning, the heavy door of the long study close at the far end of the east corridor, and then nothing for 19 minutes, and then she heard glass break. It was not a thrown glass. It was a glass set down too hard, on stone, by a man who had stopped knowing his own strength for 1 second. She did not unlock the door. He had told her to wait for word. The word came at 1:45, not from him, but from Lady Imogen, in a wrapper with her hair down her back and a candle in her hand. "Come, Marisol. Now. He's asking for you." She came. The long study at 2 in the morning was a different room. The fire was banked low. The lamps had been turned down. A single sheet of paper lay flat on the desk under the brightest of them. There was no broken glass to be seen. The Duke stood at the window with his back to the room. "Read it," he said. He did not turn. "Mother, give it to her." Lady Imogen handed her the page. It wasn't in Silas Brennick's hand. It was a printer's proof. A slip of cheap paper with the masthead of the Caldwell County Crier across the top, set in clean type, 3 columns wide. The headline read, "A Question for Heartstone Hall." Marisol read the first paragraph and felt the room narrow to a corridor. It described, in measured language, a young woman of irregular character, now resident in the household of His Grace, the Duke of Ravenmere. The second paragraph described a particular incident from her 17th year in the village of Cowdray by Marsh, in which she was alleged to have entered into an irregular understanding with a married man of property. The third described an unspecified sum of money missing from her stepfather's strongbox at the time of her departure. The fourth asked whether such a person was a fit companion for the orphaned daughter of the late Lord Edmund Heartstone. Below the 4 paragraphs ran a printer's note. Set for the Friday edition, unless withdrawn by the proprietor before the Thursday press. It was Wednesday morning. It was not yet 3. "It is a lie," Marisol said. Her voice did not sound like her voice. "The Cowdray paragraph. I was 17. The man was 38. He came to the house twice. He waited for me in the orchard a 3rd time. I ran from the orchard to the kitchen, and I told the cook, and the cook told my stepfather, and my stepfather told me I had encouraged him. He told the man's wife I had encouraged him. He took money from the man, Your Grace. The cook was put out of the house within the month for having spoken. That is the irregular understanding." She set the proof down on the desk because her hands had begun, finally, to shake. He had not turned from the window. And the strong box. 48 pounds, as I told you, and my grandmother's ring, which wasn't his to keep. The 48 pounds I cannot return because I lived on it for 9 weeks. I will work it off. I will work off twice it, Your Grace. Stop, Your Grace. Stop, Miss Vance. I did not bring you in to bargain." He turned then. His face was the face of a man who had not slept, and did not intend to sleep. There was no anger in his eyes. There was a tiredness that had been waiting in him for 5 months, and had finally been given a reason to come up to the surface. "You did not tell me about Cowdray." "No, Your Grace." "Why?" "Because there is no version of Cowdray, Your Grace, in which the telling of it makes a man think better of me. Not the men in Cowdray, not the cook who lost her place. Not, in the end, my mother, who was alive then, and chose to believe him over me. There is no audience for the Cowdray story that has ever heard it kindly, and I had every reason to expect that a man who had told me already that my unspoken pasts would put me out of his door for that one in particular. And so you decided for me? Yes. Again. Yes. He looked at her for a long moment. Get out, he said. Both of you. Now. I will not say it twice tonight. Garrick. Mother. Out. Lady Imogen took Marisol's elbow. They went. In the corridor, with the door shut behind them, Lady Imogen said quietly, Pack a small bag. Not your trunk. A bag. Be ready by 6 in the morning. Don't come downstairs until I send for you. My lady, Marisol, he has not put you out. He has not said the words. Until he says the words, you are not out. Pack the bag. Sleep if you can. I will sit with him. Marisol climbed the back stairs. She did not pack the bag. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed in her gray dress, and at 4:30 in the morning she heard a small sound at her door. It was Hattie, in her nightdress, barefoot, the cloth rabbit beneath her chin. The child had walked, alone, in the dark, the length of the second-floor corridor, down the back stairs, and along the lower passage to find her. Marisol opened her arms without speaking, and Hattie came into them, and Marisol sat on the cold floor of her small room, with the child in her lap and the rabbit between them, and Hattie was holding on to the front of her gray dress, with both small fists in a grip that did not loosen until the sky outside the window had begun, faintly, to gray. By 8 o'clock that morning, Marisol had still not been sent for, and Hattie had been carried back to her own bed by Mrs. Orry without a word of reproach to anyone. The household, with the curious tact of well-trained staff, was moving through its routines as though nothing in the night had been any different. Marisol washed her face. She dressed. She drank a cup of tea that Liddy brought up to her without being asked, and which sat slightly cooler than it should have been, because Liddy had stood for a long moment outside the door before she had knocked. At 9, Lady Imogen came up to Marisol's room. Walk with me. They walked along the upper gallery, where the morning light came in, long and even through 8 tall windows, and there was no one to overhear them. Garrick has been at his desk since 5, Lady Imogen said. He has written 4 letters. He has sent 1 rider to Salisbury and a second to London. He has summoned Mr. Hollis, who is his solicitor. He has not slept. He has not eaten. He has not, Marisol, told me to send you away. He told me to get out. He told you to get out of his study at 3 in the morning when he was holding a printer's proof in his hand. He did not tell you to get out of the house. There is a difference, and he knows it. Lady Imogen, hush. He has, in addition to the letters, sent for 2 men from London who do work of a particular kind. They are not constables, and they are not lawyers. By Thursday afternoon, my son will know more about Silas Brennick than Silas Brennick remembers about himself. He is not sending me away. He has not yet found the words to say so to you, because he is a man who has spent 5 months building a wall around a child and a household and his own heart, and last night, a man he has never met reached a hand over that wall and named the child by name in a paragraph set for the Friday edition of a county paper. He is angry. He is not angry with you. The Friday paper did not appear. By Thursday afternoon, the proprietor of the Caldwell County Crier had withdrawn the entire column. By Thursday evening, Silas Brennick had been served at Carrowfield with a packet of documents from the firm of Hollis and White on behalf of His Grace the Duke of Ravenmere, which laid out the following: that he had, on 3 documented occasions in the preceding 11 years, made and circulated allegations of moral impropriety against young women of his household, which had been demonstrated, before 2 separate magistrates, to be false; that his accounts at 4 county banks were in arrears to a sum exceeding £290; that the title to Carrowfield, which he had claimed in his late wife's right, had in fact been entailed by her father, in such a way that her daughter, Marisol Ann Vance, was the present and lawful holder of the freehold, and had been, since her 21st birthday, 11 months previously, and that any further attempt by him to communicate with the said Marisol Vance or to circulate any account of her character would be met with the immediate prosecution of every one of these matters in every available forum. Marisol learned all of this on Friday morning in the long study from Mr. Hollis in the presence of the Duke, who stood at the window and did not interrupt. "You own Carrowfield," Mr. Hollis said. He said it twice because she had not appeared to hear it the first time. "Miss Vance, the freehold. You have owned it since your 21st birthday. Your stepfather has, in legal effect, been a tenant on your land for almost a year. He has been hoping, evidently, that you would not learn it in time. In time for what? In time to refuse to sign it back to him under any duress, real or threatened, which is what the Friday column was for." She sat still. She could not feel her hands. "You are saying that he did not write that paper to drag me back. He wrote it to make me sign." "That is precisely what I am saying." The Duke turned from the window. "Mr. Hollis, leave us, please." Mr. Hollis left. The door closed. The Duke crossed the room and stopped one pace from her chair. "Stand up, please." She stood up. "I owe you an apology I am not yet able to give properly. I will give it properly in a place that is not this room, and at an hour that is not this hour. Tonight, what I owe you is plainer. I told you 11 days ago that one more piece of your past kept back from me would be the end of us. I said us. I noticed it then. I have noticed it every day since. I was a man speaking out of fear, and the cost of that fear was that you spent 4 hours last night on the floor of a small room with a 6-year-old child in your lap because you did not believe you would be permitted, in this house, to come down the corridor for help. I am ashamed of that. Your Grace, Garrick, Your Grace, I cannot. You can. You may. Tonight. In this room. Once. Once, Marisol. Please. Garrick, she said. The single use of his name moved something across his face that she did not have a word for. "Thank you," he said. He did not touch her. He did not step closer. He went back to his desk, and he sat down, and he said in the quiet voice she had heard in the corridor on the night of the miniature, "There will be a second matter. There is always a second matter with a man like that. Be ready." The second matter came on a Sunday, by way of a letter that was not, this time, addressed to the Duke or to Marisol, but to Lady Imogen, and which contained, in 3 lines, the only sentence Silas Brennick had ever written that frightened Marisol more than the first. The child's mother was not the woman the late Lord Edmund believed her to be. Ask her who Lillian Carrow was before she was Lillian Hartstone. Ask and decide whether the present arrangement at Hartstone Hall is one a court would call fit. Lady Imogen read the letter twice. Then she walked into the small library where Marisol was reading aloud to Hattie from the book about the fox in the snow, and she sat down on the window seat, and she waited until Marisol had finished the chapter. "Hattie, my dearest," Lady Imogen said gently, "will you sit a little while with Mrs. Orry? Your grandmother needs Miss Vance for a quarter of an hour." Hattie looked up from the rabbit. She looked at Marisol. She looked at her grandmother. She did not move. She slid off the window seat. She crossed the 4 paces between her seat and Marisol's chair. She climbed into Marisol's lap, the rabbit beneath her chin, and she put her small hand flat against Marisol's collarbone, and she said, in a voice rusty from disuse and small as a thrush, "Don't go, Mama." The room went still. Marisol did not breathe. Lady Imogen did not breathe. Hattie said it again, just as small, just as certain. "Don't go." Marisol's arms closed around the child without her permission. She heard, far away, her own voice say, "I am not going. I am not going anywhere, my darling. I am here." She heard Lady Imogen, softly, begin to weep without sound, the way a woman weeps who has waited 5 months to weep. The door opened. The Duke had been in the corridor on his way to speak to his mother about a matter that no longer mattered. He had heard, through the open door, his brother's daughter speak for the first time in 22 weeks, and he had heard the words she had used, and he had stopped on the threshold with one hand on the doorframe. Hattie did not turn to him. She pressed her face into Marisol's shoulder. The Duke crossed the room. He sat down on the window seat, and he set his elbows on his knees, and he watched Marisol hold his ward with a look on his face that Marisol could not have described if she had been given a year to try. It was not pride. It was not gratitude. It was the look of a man who had been holding a closed door for 5 months and had at last, in a moment he had not chosen, set his weight against the wrong side of it and felt it open. When Hattie was asleep, an hour later, the Duke rose. He came around the chair quietly. He did not touch the child. He touched, with the back of one finger, the edge of Marisol's sleeve where Hattie's small hand was clenched in it. Marisol. Garrick. Will you walk with me? The Rose Walk. Tonight. I have something I should have said to you a great while ago. Yes. He did not say what the third letter had contained. Lady Imogen, when he had withdrawn, came and knelt by the chair and put her hand on Marisol's knee and said only, "It is nothing that changes what just happened in this room. We will speak of it tomorrow. Tonight is yours." That night, at 9:30, Marisol walked with the Duke down the long gravel path between the old yews to the Rose Walk, where the late summer roses were still heavy on the canes, and the air smelled of warm wood and faint smoke from somewhere a long way off. He did not take her hand. He walked beside her with his hands behind his back, and he did not speak until they had reached the stone bench under the white rose his grandfather had planted in the year of his father's birth. "I'm in love with you," he said. He did not look at her. He looked at the white rose. "I've been in love with you, I think, since the night of the miniature, although I did not know the word for what I felt that night, and I would not have used it if I had. I am telling you tonight because my brother's child called you Mama in a small library this afternoon, and because you did not correct her, and because I do not want you ever, for the rest of your life, to be corrected on that point. I am asking Marisol, only whether, if I asked you a question at a more proper hour, with a ring my mother will choose because I am not to be trusted to choose one, you would say yes." She turned to him in the dusk under the white rose, and she put both her hands gently on either side of his face, and she said, "Ask me now. I do not want the proper hour. I want this hour. Ask me now, Garrick." He looked at her, and the expression that crossed his face in the failing light was the expression of a man who had spent 5 months bracing for a blow, and who had at last understood that the blow wasn't coming because there had never been one. He asked her. She said yes. He kissed her. Once, carefully, the way a man kisses a thing he has been told he may finally hold, and somewhere far up the path, a nightingale that had not been expected at this season began to sing, and Marisol thought, quite clearly, that whoever had told her at 17 that she was not a fit person to be loved had been a small man who had not lived long enough to know what loving was. Silas Brennick came to Briar Caldwell on the following Tuesday, in person, in a hired chaise, with 2 men who had the look of men hired by the day. He took rooms at the Black Hart Inn on the village square. He sent, on the Wednesday morning, a written request to Hartstone Hall for a private interview with His Grace, the Duke of Ravenmere, on a matter of family delicacy. The Duke's reply was delivered to the Black Hart by a footman in livery, in front of 9 villagers and the innkeeper, and it was read aloud, at Brennick's insistence, by the innkeeper, because Brennick wished to demonstrate that he had nothing to hide. The reply was 3 sentences. I will meet you in the village square at noon on Thursday, in the open air, before whatever public chooses to attend. I will not meet you in private on any matter. If you do not appear, the matter will be closed by my hand, and you will not be invited to reopen it. By 1:15 on the Thursday, the village square at Briar Caldwell held more people than it had held at the harvest fair. Mr. Hollis stood at one corner with a black leather case. Lady Imogen stood at another with her hand on Marisol's arm. Marisol wore the gray dress she had worn on her first day in the house because she had wanted, this morning, to remind herself what she had walked in with. The Duke stood in the center of the square. He was in a dark coat. He had no hat. Silas Brennick came out of the Black Hart at 5 minutes to noon. He had dressed for the occasion. He had on a coat she did not recognize, and a stick-pin she had never seen, and the tight, pleased look of a man who believed he had counted, correctly, the cards his opponent was holding. "Your Grace," he said. He bowed. He bowed too low. "I am glad of the public setting. There are matters which—" "Mr. Brennick." The Duke did not raise his voice. The square was so quiet, a child 2 rows back could be heard breathing. "I will speak first. You will listen. When I have finished, you will be invited to speak, and you will be heard in the same silence in which you are about to hear me. Is that acceptable to you?" The pleased look faltered. "Of course, Your Grace." "Mr. Hollis." Mr. Hollis stepped forward and opened the black leather case. "In the matter of allegations against Miss Marisol Vance," the Duke said, "on the question of her 17th year in Cowdrey Marsh, I have here the sworn deposition of one Hannah Tillett, formerly cook to Mr. Brennick at Carrowfield, taken before a magistrate on the 11th of this month. I have here the sworn deposition of the wife of the gentleman in question, who is now a widow. I have here the receipt, in Mr. Brennick's own hand, for 40 guineas paid to him by the gentleman on the night Miss Vance was alleged to have entered into an irregular understanding. The understanding, gentlemen, was 40 guineas, and it was struck between 2 men over the head of a girl of 17. It was not struck by Miss Vance. It was struck against her. A murmur went through the square. It was not kind to Brennick. In the matter of the strong box at Carrowfield, I have here the entail document of the late Mr. Carrow, Miss Vance's grandfather, by which the freehold of Carrowfield passed in fee simple to Miss Vance on her 21st birthday, 11 months and 3 weeks ago. Mr. Brennick has been a tenant on Miss Vance's land since that date. He has paid no rent. He has, in fact, drawn on her revenues to the sum of £140 in the same period. The £48 taken from his strongbox was, as a matter of plain law, her own money out of her own house. The murmur rose. In the matter of the column set for last week's Caldwell County Crier, I have here a sworn statement from the proprietor that the column was paid for in advance by Mr. Brennick in the sum of £9 and 6 shillings on the morning of the day before the press. He turned finally to Brennick. "Mr. Brennick, you have my word, before this company, that you will be heard without interruption. Speak, sir. The square is yours." Brennick did not speak. He had gone the color of old tallow. His mouth opened. It closed. The 2 men he had brought from London had, at some point in the recital, taken 3 steps backward, and were now no longer, plainly, in his employ. "You will leave this county," the Duke said quietly. "You will leave it today. You will not write to Miss Vance. You will not write of her. You will not set foot on the freehold of Carrowfield without her written leave, which will not come. If you do any of these things, Mr. Hollis will file every paper in that case against you in every court in the kingdom, and you will not, sir, find a banker between Salisbury and Berwick who will lend you the price of a coach. Do I make myself plain? Brennick made a small sound. It was not a word. He turned. He walked, not steadily, back into the Black Hart. By 6 in the evening he was gone from Briar Caldwell, and by 6 in the morning from the county. The Duke turned in the square and held out his hand openly to Marisol. She took it. He did not bow over her hand. He drew her, in front of the whole village, to stand beside him. "This is Miss Marisol Vance," he said, and his voice carried to the back of the square. "She is a friend of this house. She is, by my mother's choice, and by my own, the companion to my ward. She will, in due course and in proper time, be more than that. Anyone in this village who has a question about her may bring it to me." No one had a question. The proper time came on a Sunday in early October, when the white rose under which he had first asked her was past its bloom, but the late red roses on the south wall were heavy and dark. Marisol did not know it was the day until Lady Imogen came up to her room after breakfast, with a small flat box of dark blue leather in her hands. "He asked me 3 weeks ago to choose this. He wished me to give it to you first, and to ask you whether you would have it, before he places it on your finger. He said, and I quote him, 'She has been measured by a great many people for a great many things she did not ask to be measured for. She will be measured for this by no one but herself. Open it, my dear, when you are ready.' She opened it. It was not a great ring. It was a thin band of old gold, with a single small emerald set flush to the band, and a tiny seed pearl on either side of the stone. It was my own grandmother's, Lady Imogen said. She was a country gentleman's daughter, who married a country gentleman's son. She wore this ring for 51 years, and mended a great many pinafores in it. I should like to see it on a third pair of hands that knows what a pinafore is." Marisol nodded. Lady Imogen kissed her once on the forehead and went out. There was a second small thing in the room that Marisol had not seen until she turned from the window. On the writing table by the door, a folded piece of paper. On the paper, in a hand she had come to know, 3 lines. "The Rose Walk, 3 o'clock. Bring Hattie." Gee, she read it twice. She put on her best dress, which was not very fine, and she went down to the schoolroom at 2:30, and she said to Hattie, "Will you walk with me to the Rose Walk this afternoon? His Grace would like us to come to him there." Hattie did not yet speak often. She had spoken, in the 4 weeks since the small library, perhaps 30 words. Mama was the one she used most. Yes was the one she used next. "Yes," she said. Marisol fastened her cloak. She fastened Hattie's. They went down the long gravel path between the yews together, Hattie's small hand in hers, the cloth rabbit under Hattie's other arm. He was waiting on the stone bench beneath the white rose, although the white rose had finished and the canes were bare. He stood when he saw them. He came to meet them halfway. He knelt in the gravel on one knee in front of the child first. "Hattie, my love," his voice was steady, "I am about to ask Miss Vance a question. I would like, before I ask her, to ask you one. May I, with your blessing, ask Miss Vance to be my wife? Which would mean, my darling, that she would be your aunt by the law of the kingdom, and your mother by every other law that matters. It would mean she stays, with us, with you, always." Hattie looked at him for a long moment. Then she put the cloth rabbit carefully into his hands. "Yes," she said. He held the rabbit as though it were a thing made of glass. He turned, still on his knee, to Marisol. "Marisol Ann Vance, I have nothing to offer you that you cannot get for yourself. You own a freehold. You have a profession. You have a 6-year-old child who has chosen you, by the only choice a child of 6 is permitted to make, and who would follow you across the kingdom on her own 2 feet, if you asked her to. you do not need me. I am asking, in full knowledge, that you do not need me, whether you will have me. I am asking before this child, who will hold me to it, and before my mother, who is watching from the morning room window, although she has been told not to. I am asking before the white rose, which my grandfather planted in the year of my father's birth. I am asking, Marisol, please. She did not let him finish kneeling alone. She knelt down in the gravel in front of him. She took the rabbit from his hands and set it in Hattie's, and she put her hands over his hands, and she said, Yes, Garrick. Yes, of course, yes. Stand up, my love. The gravel is hard, and the child is watching. He laughed. He had not laughed, that she had heard, in 5 months. He laughed in the rose walk at 3 o'clock on a Sunday in October, and Hattie, on the gravel beside them with the rabbit pressed to her chest, looked from his face to Marisol's face, and Hattie laughed too, a small, rusty laugh, the first laugh in 26 weeks, and the three of them on their knees in the gravel under the bare canes of the white rose laughed together. And somewhere up at the morning room window, a woman of 63 years pressed her palm flat against the glass and wept without sound for the first happy reason in a great while. The ring fitted as though it had been made for her. It had not been made for her. It had been made 68 years before for a country gentleman's daughter who had also mended pinafores. Marisol thought, looking down at the small green stone in the late October light, that perhaps that was the same thing. The household was told that evening at supper. Mrs. Penhale wept into her napkin, which she had never done in 23 years of service. Mr. Caddick cleared his throat 3 times in succession, which was the closest he came in public to an emotion. Lady Imogen brought Marisol, after supper, into the small library. She unlocked, with a key from the chain at her waist, a low cupboard Marisol had not noticed before, and from it she lifted a wooden box of dark walnut, polished by handling. She set it on the table. "Open it." Marisol opened it. Inside were letters, folded, sealed, opened again, and refolded. Some new, some yellowed, 31 of them. 31 women, Lady Imogen said quietly. Across 19 years. Some I helped through one bad winter, some I placed in households. Some I gave a coach fare and a name to write to in London. 2 I helped to leave husbands the law would not have let them leave. All of them knew what I was doing, and chose to allow me to do it, and chose to write back when their lives had become their own. My husband knew. He helped. Garrick, until you, did not know. I told him last week. He has asked me whether he might continue what I have done, with you, on a larger scale. I have said yes, if you say yes. Yes, Marisol said. She did not need to think. Lady Imogen closed the box. Then we are 32, she said. And we begin again, with a different door. 8 months after the Rose Walk, on a morning in June, Marisol Hartstone, Duchess of Ravenmere, woke in the tall east bedroom of Hartstone Hall, with the early light coming in long across the foot of the bed, and the sound, far off, of a small voice in the corridor singing something tuneless and pleased to a cloth rabbit. Garrick was already awake. He was lying on his side watching her, with the still attention she had first seen on his face in the doorway of his study in another life, and which now meant something entirely different. "You are staring," she said, without opening her eyes. "I am." "It is uncivil. I know. What time is it?" 6:15. She has been up since 6. She is teaching the rabbit a song. It is, I suspect, an original composition. Marisol smiled into the pillow. "Stay there," he said. 5 more minutes. She will not come in. She has been instructed, by your authority, and not mine, that the door does not open before the 6:45, and she keeps your laws. She keeps everyone's laws now. She is a small magistrate. She sentenced the undergardener to read 3 pages of the Fox book aloud yesterday because he had stepped on a snail. A guilty verdict. He did step on the snail. She laughed. She had not, in the year she had been at Carrowfield, and the 7 years before that, laughed easily in the morning. She laughed easily now. The work of the box, as she and Lady Imogen had come to call it between themselves, had grown. There were now 4 women in residence at Carrowfield, which Marisol had reopened with her own freehold and her husband's blessing as a quiet house for women in need of a season's safety and a trade to take with them. Hannah Tillett, the cook from the Cowdrey deposition, ran the kitchen. A young woman named Bess Hollow, who had walked to Hartstone Hall in February, with a black eye and no shoes, was learning the dairy. The schoolroom at Carrowfield was run by a former governess from Yorkshire, whose case Mr. Hollis had quietly mended. In 8 months, it had given 13 women a beginning. The first letter had come in March. It was from Pell, the kitchen maid who had been struck in the corridor on the night of the miniature. Pell had, on Marisol's recommendation, been moved the following spring to a household in Bath, and had been, 4 months later, promoted from kitchen to under-housekeeper, which at her age was unheard of, and was now, the letter said, walking out with a respectable young man who kept a small bookshop in the town, and had told her, on their second walk, that he liked a girl who had read the books on her own shelf. I would not have come to Bath, Your Grace, if you had not spoken to Mrs. Penhale for me. I would not have spoken to the young man, Your Grace, if I had not learned, in your house, that a girl is allowed to speak first, if the speaking is true. I am very well. I am very glad. Your servant always, Eliza Pell. Marisol had laid the letter down on the breakfast table, and she had wept into her napkin, and Garrick had, without comment, put his hand on the back of her chair, and Hattie had said, around a mouthful of toast, "Mama is happy crying. It is all right." It had been all right. It was all right now, in the June morning, with Hattie singing in the corridor, and Marisol thought about the girl in the muddy lane in Briar Caldwell, who had been counting 11 shillings into the hem of her cloak. And she thought about the woman that girl had become, and she thought that the distance between the two was the length of one offered hand and one stubborn child, and one man who had learned to set down a wall he had not known he could carry any other way. Garrick reached for her hand under the coverlet. "Marisol." "Yes." "What are you thinking?" "That defying you on the upper landing was the best thing I have ever done in my life. I shall have it engraved." "On what?" "On the ring. Inside." "There is no room inside the ring." "Then on the white rose." "The white rose will not bear engraving." "Then on Hattie's rabbit." "Now you are blaspheming." He laughed. She turned in the early light and laid her hand against the side of his face, and she said, "Ask me once a year, Garrick, for the rest of my life. Ask me, on a morning like this, whether I would do it again, and I will tell you yes. I would walk up that staircase 10,000 times to be exactly where I am at this hour. Even the gravel. Especially the gravel." The clock in the corridor struck 7:15. The door opened, carefully, by a small hand that had been told not to open it before the 7:15 and had counted, all the way down the corridor, to be sure. Hattie came in with the rabbit, and a slightly crooked plait, and one slipper on the wrong foot, and she climbed up onto the bed, without invitation, because the household had decided, between itself some months previously, that the 7:15 was the family hour, and the family hour did not require an invitation. "Mama." "Yes, my darling." "The rabbit knows a new song." "Then we must hear it." The rabbit's new song was tuneless and pleased, and went on for some time, and Hattie sang it with great seriousness into the cloth ear that Marisol had mended on her second morning in the house, and Garrick lay on one elbow and watched the two of them with the look on his face that Marisol had first seen in the small library on the Sunday Hattie had spoken, and which she had now, at last, the word for. That, Marisol thought, is what it looks like when a man stops being afraid. If you have stayed with Marisol and Garrick and a small girl with a cloth rabbit, until this hour, thank you. Thank you for choosing, in a quiet evening of your own life, to listen to a story about a woman who walked up a staircase she had been told not to walk up, and a man who learned that the people who deserve our trust are very often the ones we were most certain, on the first day, that we should never give it to. Thank you for believing that a child's first word, after a long silence, is worth waiting for, and that the small kindnesses we do for the people who cannot yet do anything for us in return are very often the things that come back to us in unexpected hands, in unexpected springs. If this story has reminded you that defiance, at the right hour, can be a kind of love, and that love, at the right hour, can be a kind of courage, I would like very much to hear so in the comments. Your presence is the reason these stories are written. Until the next one finds us, be brave at the doors that matter, and be gentle with the people on the other side of them. Good night.